Hey there, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. This is Talking to Myself, the part of the day where I talk to myself about things that I was thinking the night before while laying in bed. Shout out, of course, to DJ OSMO Action, because it is recording me, and it also recorded some of the clips of me that I'm going to be sharing in this video, shooting some of these shots that I shot at another minor league baseball game for my sports photography. And shout out to all 1,000 and something of you guys that are subscribed at the time of making this video. I truly do appreciate that. Especially because I don't ask you, so I appreciate you doing it out of your own will. I also just want to say no more free shit, so I'm not going to be shouting out any other company until they want to sponsor anything. So shout out Fujifilm US for sending me gear. They're going to be sending me a medium format camera pretty soon, hopefully, once they get one back in stock. And what I want to talk about today was originally just going to be a video about me showing my autofocus settings on the X-H1, just to talk to you about, like, basically this camera is more than good enough. It's actually excellent at sports photography. But the thing I really want to mention before I do that is I have an issue, and that's the issue of bias against not just APS-C but Fujifilm as a camera company completely. The reason why I have an issue with it and why I can actually state there's bias against it is because, I just think it's funny that a camera this good, that has great face detection, that has IAF, that does great, amazing tracking, shoots 14 frames per second, continuous high bursts, has a mechanical and electronic shutter. I never have any buffer issues. Has two, count them, two SD card slots. A camera like this gets shit on a lot, including the X-T3, the X-T4, for not being professional enough. And this is not what a professional would use. If I look at it, so many excuses were made for the original Nikon Z cameras, and I love the Nikon Z cameras, for the Canon EOS R, and the Canon EOS R is a great camera. But so many excuses were made because the autofocus wasn't great. You remember the EOS R rollout, and you can tell me, oh, it's perfect for portraits at least. It's not, but it doesn't matter. People just didn't want to use it like that. This was a professional camera, is what they built it at. They came back later and said it was their entry level mirrorless full frame camera. Same thing with the Nikon Z series. Things have not stacked up to where these companies have said they would be. When it comes to Panasonic and Leica, some of the worst autofocus ever, whether in the SL or in the SH system. But people make excuses for them. The EOS R didn't even have two card slots. The Z6 and the Z7 didn't even have two card slots. But here I have a toy camera, what a lot of people would say, that actually has had better focus throughout the whole entirety, up until recently, where Canon made a big leap to get closer to Sony. So up until about a year ago, this was the second best focusing mirrorless system. And now I would claim it as the third best, and they're going to get better with the new processor and this BIS stacked illuminated sensor. So here's my thing, is we don't make excuses for Fujifilm, and we shit on their focusing in APS-C and their medium format, etc., etc. But we never do that to any full frame cameras or any full frame camera manufacturers. They get a pass. They get a pass when they don't have a lot of glass, because you can adapt old glass, even though this system has glass that is not only, and I'm not being biased, I've owned a lot of stuff, and I will be honest, like the Canon 50mm 1.2, no one's going to touch that. But when it comes to a telephoto lens, this 70-200 equivalent is the sharpest 70-200 that I've ever used. I don't care about your G Master, and I don't care about your new RF 70-200. This lens is sharper. If this were a full frame camera, I'm telling you right now, Nikon or Canon, one of those two would be eating dust right now. But because it's APS-C and people have a vendetta against this, people have a vendetta against medium format because they are fanboys of other companies, they shit on these cameras. Here's the plain simple truth. This camera is not only great for sports and does a lot better than multiple of your professional geared cameras, full frame cameras for sports. If you're shooting portraits and you have to rely on eye autofocus the whole time, that's fine. That's cute. But you can still get eye autofocus with this even when the eye autofocus doesn't work. And if you don't know what I'm saying, I can't help you. If you didn't come from a DSLR, if you didn't come from an old mirrorless system, I can't help you understand that. And the sad thing is there are so many YouTubers that have been DSLR users that are now saying negative things about cameras like this, whenever my question is, were you never professional enough to get an in-focus shot ever? When it comes to shooting sports, usually you're using zone focus or single point, but apparently that changed just because everyone wants to rely on eye autofocus. Contrast-based cameras, my Canon C300 that I used for years, the 6 of them that I used, they were contrast-based whenever it was in continuous. I usually used one shot, but they didn't have phase detect. And everyone wants to talk about phase detect this, the autofocus points this, the speed this, the algorithm this. And here's the thing I have to tell you. Sony had such a leg up when it came to their processing power that they were able to make amazing autofocus and make that jump with the A7 III that blew everyone out of the water. But now that Canon's caught up, and Nikon will catch up, and Fujifilm will catch up with the new process and the fact they're having a stacked backside illuminated sensor for their APS-C, what will really be the discerning factor for you whenever you make your purchase? Will it just be the fact that it's full frame? Because I can tell you right now, I've done side-by-sides, and I probably will do another side-by-side. But this camera has better grain at high ISO, and even though it's a couple years old and it's an old processor, and even the XS10 does, than a lot of your fancy full-frame cameras. What I'm saying is this, is we choose who we have bias towards. And it's very obvious whenever we have bias for full frame cameras just because we either use them or because we spent the money. And my thing is this, when you have new people coming into a system, whether they're shooting APS-C, medium format, full frame, micro four thirds, stop giving your opinion on something you've never used. And stop giving your opinion on something that you don't think is professional enough to handle your work, when the point is, it's because you're not professional. Because if this can handle my work and the things that I'm being asked to do, and for the amount of money that's being exchanged from my hand versus my employers, this is more than enough. That makes me question, why are you so limited to the gear that you're using to where if you were to have this, you couldn't get the same results? And if you can't get the same results out of every camera that someone's giving you, the thing I have to tell you is this: you need to go back. You need to learn lighting. You need to learn basically anything else, anything besides what your camera specs say, because you're not there yet. And I'm just being honest with you. And listen, you can make great photos with the Sony A7 III and Godox 8200. That's fantastic. I'm not saying you can't. What I'm saying though is you will end up hitting a limitation to where your camera makes up for the fact that you don't know enough about the art of photography. That's not a bad thing. I've been there before. I used to rely on Sony autofocus. I switched to Fujifilm, and I started shooting things different. I started shooting street and things like that. And I realized I'm not as good as I think I was. I'm always shooting wide open. Nothing's in focus but one tree branch or one person. I had to learn how to stop down. I had to learn how to adjust ISO. I had to learn how to adjust shutter speed. I had to learn with this camera, basically what was pleasing, what wasn't. I had to stop relying on just fast apertures from whenever I came from my Canon gear. I had to figure out what my style was. And listen, once I figured out my style, how I color graded, how I adjusted things, how I color balanced, how I composed, how I weighted my images, that's whenever my style became the style of D Rosa. It wasn't just because I had autofocus and I shot with the same presets bought from a Manny Ortiz or Fronos Photo or John Branch 4 Photography that everyone else used. It was because I made a concerted effort to go out and create something that was me, that was 100% me, and that was only me. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with using those things, and I'm not trying to be someone who's shitting on people and talking mess, but I'm saying before you give a negative review about something you've never used in your life, use it or shut your mouth. Because here's the thing, I'm telling you right now, this X-H1, you can put this up against an R6, and you won't be able to see a difference in function whatsoever. Yes, will there be a little bit more times where it focuses on the eye? Yeah, there probably will be, especially from far distances. But at the same time, if I'm at a far distance, who the hell is having their subject only take up 20% of the frame at a far distance and they're on autofocus? And who the hell is going to zoom in 5 to 6 times to 300% in order to get the eye autofocus, to make sure it hit the eye? Makes no sense to me. Who's going to shoot wide open when you have a job? I mean, that's the things that I don't get and that concern me. But listen, I'm not here to tell you what to do and what's wrong, but I'm just saying, and when it comes to this, let me just talk to you through basically how I have this camera set up. Number one, there's 2 things to know. When I am shooting, it's almost always going to be in continuous when I'm shooting the sports section, unless I see them and they're basically, I'll put it on single focus and continuous high if they're in a batter's box, because sometimes if I can get their face while they're taking practice swings or anything like that, I'll do that, but then I'll switch to continuous so that whenever they hit and they start running, I got them. Almost always it's going to be in continuous high. I have it set to 14 frames per second. I have it set to where when my dial for ISO is set on auto, I control it up here and back here with my control dial. So I think the front is actually shutter speed and my back control wheel is actually ISO. This is just easier for me than looking down because I'm having to adjust between if there's a light cutoff. where there's a shadow, I'm adjusting between my shadows, ISO up, and in the sun, ISO down. Very simple thing, but it does make a difference. I didn't come over to Fujifilm for the dials. I came over for the low light capability, and I came over to Fujifilm for the colors, basically, and for the way that it renders blues and greens. It had nothing to do with the dials. The dials are just a plus. My aperture, the whole day, unless I'm doing warm-ups, then I'll bring it down to 500th of a second because people are still throwing and moving. The whole day is at 2,000ths of a second, even if I'm in low light. One of the benefits that I have is I have purchased and invested in the 50 to 140 f2.8 from Fujifilm. This was a fantastic investment. It's a great lens. It's light. It's the lightest 70 to 200 equivalent you're going to come across. Yes, I know that the 70 to 200 from Canon is super duper small, but just because it's small, whenever it extends, doesn't mean that it's the lightest thing out there. This thing is weighted perfectly on the X-H1. It just feels right. I also have a 1.4 time teleconverter that changes this from about a 105 to around 350 f4 lens. So that's also pretty good because it kind of takes that 70 to 200 kind of want that I had out of it, but for only a couple $100 I was able to get that in f4 instead of 5.6 to 6.2 or 4.5 to 5.6. So I have that. Back button autofocus is always on. This is my AF on button, is my back button autofocus. I have this there, and it's fantastic. When it comes to my display, I always have my display like this. Basically, the reason is because I want to be able to see everything at a glance. I don't need live view because I'm looking to the viewfinder, and I don't need to really chimp at my photos because I'm kind of shooting, and only if I know I saw some action I like, I'll go through and in between innings, I'll lock that image. That way, it's one of the ones that imports. I don't import all the photos that I took. When it comes to everything else, I have my buttons set up. So I have one of these assigned to face and eye auto off because I want to be able to take that off for whenever I'm shooting. I have my color balance. I have my focus points, so I usually have it on single autofocus. And then also another one is the fact that I have it on my continuous high. Right now it's at 8 frames per second. And so I have it basically where it needs to be in my burst, so I can be able to change that at a glance. I have my drive settings. When it comes to image quality, and you can see it right here, I'm going to shoot raw, and I'm going to shoot raw all the way through, and it's going to duplicate to both cards. I shoot compressed, not uncompressed, because I haven't seen a difference between the compressed images and the uncompressed images. Grain effect, I have that off. Dynamic range, I have that set to 400, or auto actually. Let it do whatever it does. My white balance is auto. My highlight tone is at 0. My shadow tone is at -1. My color is at 0. My sharpness is at -2. And my noise reduction is at -4. I want as natural as an image as I can. I don't really care if my image is overly sharpened and whatnot. I can always do that in post. I go through X Transformer going into Lightroom. It's a $40 plugin. It's an amazing investment, trust me. Lens modulation optimizer off. Color space is sRGB. We'll skip everything else. My focus area, I told you it's a single point, usually in the center. AFC custom settings, I usually always have this on custom setting 2 or 4. Reason being is it works best for me, but you're gonna have to find out what works best for you. Store AF mode by orientation, I have that off. I have my display points on, and then I have it set to 325 points. Have all of them. If you have them, use them. My pre-AF is off because I don't want my camera wasting battery, having to look for the autofocus point before I even do it. My AF illuminator is off as well. I have face eye detection off most of the time unless I'm doing a portrait or unless I'm getting a player in between innings and he's just sitting there looking. Then I'll put the AI AF on, but again, it's just a button away. Focus check is on. Manual focus is peak. Don't ever use that. Instant AF setting is set to AFS. I don't want that on AFC, just on AFS. Depth of field scale is pixel. Release focus priority. This is a big one. Release focus priority. I have it on release for both. Okay, have it on release for both. My drive setting, I adjust that myself. Self timer off. I'm always shooting on the mechanical shutter. I won't shoot the electronic shutters on this for a sport like baseball or soccer until the X-H2 comes out. That back illuminated sensor is actually going to do wonders for all of us who shoot sports and want to shoot them with Fujifilm. Trust me, if you look up the Sony A1 and the Sony A9, when they started using back illuminated sensors, things became a lot better. There was less warping on fast moving objects such as as a baseball whenever it's hit, pitched, or a soccer ball once it's kicked. Flicker reduction is off. Don't need it. My auto ISO, I have it on auto ISO 1 again. Once I set my dial to auto, I have it to where I can control it with the back scroll wheel. My dog's here again because he's a little baby and he needs love at all times. Movie mode, I record an F-log. You don't really need to know about that. Some things that we're gonna go to the wrench menu, to the final menus, to the setup, and we're gonna figure out. First things first, rest in peace, Uncle Phil. You're the only father that I ever knew. Anyway, when it comes to AF beep and stuff like that, I have that off. One thing I will say, EVF brightness is on auto. I know a lot of people like it on high and stuff. I have it on auto because, trust me, sometimes you're looking in that EVF for so long, and if it's too bright, it kind of jacks with your eyes if you're sitting in shadow. I don't have image rotation on, but I do have what is called natural live view. Natural live view, put that to on. That is going to help with your focusing so much. Now, your image may be darker, a little bit darker than basically what you're going to shoot afterwards. So you may be seeing things brighter and the image is darker, or vice versa. But listen, you need to be making sure. That's why I like using this back section right here, because it has the histogram. And also, you need to be making sure that when it comes to your exposure in the EVF, I have it right here, you're using that exposure meter. Use that exposure meter. Make sure you're at a correct exposure, or a stop over, or a stop down, whatever you choose to do. Have that exposure meter. Use that exposure meter. That's what it's there for. Listen, but the last thing is making sure your shutter AF for continuous. So you're going to go into the wrench section. It's in button dial settings. It's in menu 2 of 3. Your shutter AF, your shutter autofocus. Make sure if you're in continuous, that is off. You want that off because I don't want to have back button autofocus on and then I press the shutter and then it refocus. But that's basically it, man. I'll put in some video and whatnot here at the end and some of the images that I took. Sorry for the long rant, but I thought I'd want to show you guys that just so you can see my settings. If you want more in-depth stuff to it, or you want to look at my screen from the back, you can go ahead and ask. But you know, again, it's basically, man, you got to figure out for yourself what you want to do and how you want to shoot. You got to figure out your own things, but these are some things that I can tell you that work for me and they work great, and I would recommend them to you. Shooting at that certain shutter speed, you don't have to shoot at f/2000th of a second in like basketball or in football, but baseball and soccer, where things are being launched very quickly, you're going to want to use that. So thanks for listening. Hope this helped out. Let me put that other clip if I don't talk to you again. See you soon. Have a good one. I'm here with my bad bitch. Hi, bad bitch. So I'm at the Missions Park Nathan Wolf Stadium. Today we're gonna do some portraits and whatnot with some of the guys, actually on a Saturday and then a Sunday, so it's a 2-day thing. So I'll do portraits and then be shooting. The portraits are for a promotional deal, and so I'll take some of them of a couple players. These players are highlighted because potentially they are early year transaction next year call-ups. So it's just good for promotion for whenever they're doing stuff. They can put it on banners. They can put these people on their flyers and whatnot. Basically, everyone wants to come see the new talent. This is, last night they had the Fernando Tatis. They gave away his jerseys and his bobbleheads. Of course, Fernando played 2 seasons here with the Flying Chanclas, aka the San Antonio Missions. And so we're just going to be taking some shots of whoever they need us to. We'll be in the dugout. We were going to get on the field, but they called that off. So we will be in the dugout. And we will be just near the field, so we'll try to do some things. I can't get the environment shots that I wanted as far as people in the batter's box. In the field, there's position on the mound, but we're just gonna have to work around it. We'll do some things with them in the dugout, some dramatic whatnot, some dramatic lighting. I'm using the Godox 8200 with a, I believe it's a Weebay, shout out to the wire, or a Waylight, paradoxal, whatever in the world it's called, softbox. I don't really know the technical shit. And so we'll use that. We'll go out there and we'll shoot, take some nice photos of them, and then we'll sit down. We're going to enjoy the game, and we're going to root for the San Antonio Missions, aka the Flying Chanclas, whatever they are today. I don't know who I'm going to be taking photos of, but I will be sure to record while I'm doing it to show how I'm directing them, what exactly I'm doing. Okay, so I'm a dumbass, and let me get this thing to focus. They didn't let me take the camera on the field while I was taking photos of one of the players, so now me and the baddie are here. We're just relaxing, we're waiting. I bought a seat so that I can sit by her, but other than that, my ass is gonna be walking around or whatnot.